Artist Toolkit
with Guitar.
Hi, I'm Adam Goldsmith. I'm a session guitar player from London, and this is my Artist Toolkit. If you haven't heard of me, you probably haven't. I've spent a long time playing on TV shows such as The X Factor, American Idol, The Voice, all sorts of bits and pieces, quite a lot of film soundtracks, including Harry Potter, Bridget Jones, Mission Impossible, lots of others, and lots of artists. I've played with Seal, Robbie Williams, Gloria Estefan, Elton John, all sorts of different people over the years. And what I thought I might do is have a look at what a basic sort of skeleton rig, which if I couldn't take a huge studio rig, what could I take which would be portable and affordable, and I could pretty much do anything that I needed to do in the studio or on a live gig. So this is kind of what I've come up with. This is very similar to I've got a 1967 335, and this one I'm going to steal it. They don't know that yet. This is a Murphy Lab 335. It's, incredible guitar off the wall back here. I think this is a 61, and I've got a Strat here as well. So those are the two guitars that I think I'd take. If I could narrow it down to two guitars, I'd take those. And what have we got here? We've got a wah pedal, a volume pedal. This is a Strymon Sunset overdrive pedal, but any sort of dual distortion pedal would probably do the trick. I use King of Tone a lot of the time. And also the very fine Line 6 HX Effects, which has got everything you need and much more in it. What I tend to play in a lot of different styles, so I'd want to have lots of levels of gain at my feet and accessible. So when the MD or the producer, whoever it is, would ask me about playing a particular style, I would be able to get an appropriate sound up really quickly. To that end, I've got this Fender Deluxe amp here. I think it's probably the most useful studio amp that you can get, in my experience. You can also lift it up, which you can't do with the twin. Well, you can, but ouch. So yeah, I guess we could go very quickly through different styles. I've also got this volume pedal here in line before the distortion, and I find that very handy because it acts like turning the gain down on the guitar rather than having it after the distortion pedal, which just turns the volume down. So it's really useful to vary your levels of gain, which I find super useful in a studio situation. So maybe I'll demonstrate getting through some styles really quickly. So if you're in a TV studio or an environment where you have to get things done quickly, such as the X Factor or American Idol or one of those kind of things. No one wants to wait around for you to be faffing around with your pedals, so you need to be able to get this stuff quickly, and it needs to sound decent. So to start off, I guess I can get a very straight ahead sort of jazzy sound should I need it, and maybe something like this. And very quickly I add a little bit of gain. And then we can go to a more sort of full-on kind of rock sound with using the other side of the Sunset. I've got these settings up super quickly, which is what I like. I don't want to be surfing through menus all day. So this is not my pedal. So I've literally got this up in about 30 seconds and come up with a decent sound. Well, I think it's decent. You might not. I don't know. Guess we'll find out. So we've sort of got all the levels of gain there, really, and you could get, say, if you've got a little bit of tape echo, you can get your kind of country sounds, which are surprisingly useful. And maybe a little bit of a chorus for those kind of bit more kind of 80s sort of rhythm parts. It might be a little bit much, but you get the idea. Yeah, so, the wah-wah pedal as well. So I don't use wah-wahs a lot, but you've got to have one there because it's a bit embarrassing if somebody says, can you play wah on here? And you say, no, I've left it at home. So yeah, I mean, I think that if I turned up with these things, so a 335, a Strat, a Deluxe, and these three pedals, I think I could have done probably 99% of my entire career. I mean, I haven't done that. I've spent millions of pounds on all sorts of amps and pedals and things. But I reckon, you know, if, God forbid, my house burnt down, this is what I'd buy in order to, you know, go to work. So a pedal like the HX Effects is super useful because it's got essentially everything in there that you're ever going to want. I've got a huge studio board as well with a bunch of boutique pedals and, you know, all sorts of different bits and pieces on. It's wider than my car, you know. But to be honest, you don't always need it. I think, in my experience, what's really important is knowing your gear rather than having loads of it. So, for example, a guitar like the 335. I mean, I'm not the first person to say this. I think Larry Carlton did it. You know, sort of, maybe not his invention, but certainly he popularised using these as great studio guitars. Because you can pretty much play anything on it, really, you know. And that in combination with something like a dual overdrive and the HX Effects, there's pretty much, I can't think of many styles, with the possible exception of, you know, like fully extreme death metal. They haven't done that on X Factor as far as I know, no. You've pretty much got all the bases covered, and really the important thing is that it's so usable and you can get to your sounds really quickly without having a bunch of complicated menus and, you know, 8 million boutique pedals. I found that in TV, that's really important. If I've done a film soundtrack, I remember doing the King of Thieves film soundtrack, and I did take loads of different old vintage amps and bits and pieces. We recorded it at Abbey Road Studios. And we had the luxury of having a bit more time. And sometimes that's really nice, you know, but you don't always need it. And especially when your guitar's sitting in a mix, you can't necessarily hear the difference between, say, a delay from something like the HX Effects and something which is perceived to be a bit more high-end, maybe a Strymon timeline or an Eventide delay or something like that. You can't really hear it. And what's more, the first thing that a lot of engineers will tell you to do is turn off your delay and your reverb. So whilst it's amazing to have loads of sort of boutique effects, I think that this is a super cool mini rig, you know. Another little trick, the one which I would like to use, is, you know, if you've got to get a sort of stratty kind of Nile Rodgers groovy sound out of a guitar like the 335, this is one of the reasons why I have the volume pedal acting as a gain rather than a traditional volume, is that if you have it in the middle position, you can kind of get this sort of a funky sound just by backing the gain off a little bit. and it doesn't sound too humbuckery. That's obviously a very useful style of guitar playing. And because you've got the 3-3-5, you can go from that very quickly to, you know, your sort of jazzy kind of. Maybe with a little boost to bring out the single lines. And then straight on to the kind of full. So to that end, really, the most important thing that I can think of is knowing how to use your gear. Rather than having loads of it, you've got to know how to use it, how to employ gain stages with something such as the Strymon, and using the volume controls and your pickup controls. So, I mean, you've got a bunch of different sounds. I've heard Joe Bonamassa talk about this, and he's completely correct. It's a maybe not a lost art, but it's on its way to being lost. Maybe, I don't know. You've got, you know, at least 5 or 6 kind of different tones just from your volume knobs. You know, I find that's really important. If you want to get a different sound quickly, you can go very quickly from this kind of a Rolling Stones sort of crunch to this. Very quickly, and really all I've done is fiddle and press one button. So yeah, I'd say that's, if I had any advice, it's just to know your gear rather than having too much of it, because you can kind of get a sort of option paralysis, you know, if you've got too much stuff. I think if I could add anything to this little setup here, I'd probably have a good compressor pedal as well. That would be the only other thing. I've got a Wampler Ego compressor, which I think is fabulous. It's got a good mix control on it as well. The HX Effects does have compressors in it as well, but it's nice to have one at the other end of the signal chain, because you want the compressor ideally to come before the distortion. They're a bit sort of underappreciated, I think, compressors. They really help you sit in the mix. So a lot of the time they become associated with country music. But also, if you've got a little poppy picking line, I'm going to think of something, maybe something like this. That's the kinky compressor on here, but it can really help you sit in the mix. You don't notice it so much when you're playing on your own, but you'll definitely notice it even in a TV mix, which are not always the greatest, or definitely a record mix. So that's a very useful thing to have as well. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Adam Goldsmith, and this has been my Artist Toolkit.